Okay, let's go ahead and jump straight into match 2 with our Nahida Rainbow deck. And we're facing off here against a double Pyro Itto deck, which is a very scary combo deck. And I think this is one of our harder matchups because that deck often sort of combos off on turn 3, and if you don't have the ability to put direct pressure on them, it can be very difficult to stop. Now he has some interesting choice from opening hand. The Nahida tank card is way too slow for this match. The free swap changing shifts is interesting and could be very good in this matchup, but we can't really afford to keep it in our opening hand because we're looking for some very important cards, and we end up drawing Paimon and Liu Su, both of which are very good. We start on Raiden Shogun here still, although it's definitely a harder decision than it would be at some decks, but the Electro application is still really important, and we're looking as a priority for Electro Dice, but Pyro as a secondary choice because having the option of using Zhang skill on turn 1 can be very good. Now, we have a few options here, and there is definitely an option which involves potentially I'm considering swapping to Zhang with Liu Su and just going from there. But it's the case in this matchup that a lot of the time in the early turns they're going to be ending their turn on less important characters like Bennett and Yoimiya, and really you just need to set up everything you can to maximize your damage against Itto, and the extra burst damage buff from the Raiden Shogun summon is going to be really important. So in this situation we're faced with the fact that we need to tune one card in order to execute our turn 1. In this case we probably won't be playing the Paimon because playing the Zhang skill, getting more damage on the Yoimiya, pushing back to Itto would actually be pretty bad for us. Really you just want to put as much damage as you can, as much pressure as you can on the Itto. So we really want to ramp, make our next turns better. And the Covenant of Rock is really good with Vanarana, but if we tune the toss-up to make that play, it's extremely likely that, with only one card left in our hand, or actually 0 cards left in our hand after the turn 1, drawing 2 cards, and not really having any fixing available, we could just lose to getting screwed by our dice. And it's not even that unlikely. So even though playing Vanarana into Covenant of Rock would be ideal, and is the highest payoff player, I tune the Vanarana here, keeping the toss up, and making sure I don't just randomly lose to insane RNG on the dice. This does have the downside that our Covenant of Rock isn't going to be so useful in this game. We can still use it turn 2 or turn 3 with cards like Strategize maybe, or food like Lotus Flower Crisp, which can be very good to have at the end of turn 3 in order to protect yourself from Itto and sort of the combo turn where he goes off with loads of normal attacks. But we're kind of forced to make this play. Okay, so in this situation we do want to get Zhang skill out, and we do want to charge up Zhang burst, but the odds of being able to get 7 Pyro dice for Zhang skill and Zhang burst aren't that high even with the toss up in hand. And more than that, that Zhang burst, that's probably our biggest source of burst damage in this game. That's 4 damage with this Raiden summon out, and if we use it this turn it's just going to land on Bennett and not even kill the Bennett. So maybe, especially given the quick swap we have left in hand, if we save the Zhang burst, then maybe we can get it to land as a burst damage on Itto later. As it is, much more efficient to just charge up, well, to save the Dendro dice for now and leave the burst charged up. This way we don't have to fodder our whole hand to try to get enough Pyro dice to actually use the Zhang burst. We could have followed one card, but all these cards in our hand, we actually wouldn't mind tuning the Covenant of Rock. But this is also more dice efficient, where we're using our dice more efficiently rather than wasting them, which would be the other outcome possible. So opponents managed to set up the game plan quite nicely. They've used their Bennett first at the end of turn 2, which is ideal for them. They've got a Parametric Transformer out and a Paimon out to give them dice for their next turn. So this game has gone pretty much to plan for the Pyro Itto deck, and they are going to be able to start to combo off next turn. And since we can't save this dice to our next turn or anything, using the food efficiently, and Nahida is an important character. There are some ways Nahida could die next turn to just a couple of attacks, so it is worth using the food here. So again, we get damage here on Bennett, which isn't great, but we did manage to engineer a catalyze reaction, which will help us to get more damage in the future on our Dendro attacks, which is quite nice. That means, an overload reaction on Bennett wouldn't necessarily have been helpful. Pushing onto Yoimiya is kind of pointless. Damage on Bennett's kind of pointless. But that catalyzed reaction is quite valuable. So we're assuming here we're going to have to use some skill on Nahida, and we've got the possibility of both Nahida and Zhang Ling's burst as our two biggest source of burst damage. Now we don't really want to use damage on his Bennett, so reasonable to think about maybe here swapping to Zhang Ling and saving the damage. Opponent might then have to swap off his Bennett. But looking at our hand, it's very important to realize we have two cards. We have both the Changing Shifts and the I Haven't Lost Yet. So we can do a quick free swap to our Zhang Ling to burst on Zhang Ling. And actually 10 dice, that's enough for 3 cost Nahida skill and 3 cost Nahida burst and Zhang Ling burst. And that's going to be the biggest amount of damage we can put out this turn onto his Itto. So he's going to swap to his Itto. I'm expecting opponent to have potentially cards like I Haven't Lost Yet for extra dice to charge him towards his burst. And, but he's only got 5 cards in hand. There's only so much he can have, and we can't play around everything. If he has those cards, maybe he's less likely to have cards like Minty Meat Rolls to give him a discount. So I'm using my burst here, knowing this is my maximum damage I can do, doing a quick calculation and realizing that after he uses any move, heals for 2 with the Bennett burst, then my Zhang Ling burst should be lethal on his Itto. And I know that his deck doesn't contain any cards like Lotus Flower Crisp or Monster Hash Brown, because actually those cards kind of mess up with the plan to play Minty Meat Rolls on the combo turn in order to get more normal attacks out. And here our opponent is forced to just use a normal attack or a skill and depend on the healing from the Bennett burst to give them the sustain. But this plays into that we were discussing. We're able to quick swap to our Zhang Ling and use Zhang Ling's burst for a nice bit of burst damage on his Itto, which opponent didn't really have any right to expect. And obviously it's lucky for us to have those 2 cards, but we planned our turn with that in mind, knowing we had this potential play, and we were then able to pull it off. So a really close run thing there, because if Itto had survived, he would have been able to pretty much sweep our entire team if opponent had certain cards. Whereas a Yoimiya here, even with the Bennett burst still active, is a lot less scary than an Itto with several stacks of superlative super strength and a burst charge up. They can do a lot of damage to us, but nowhere close to actually taking out our entire team. And as such, as opponent ends the round, the summons go off, we're able to get exact lethal damage and close out a win. But again, it was really close, well played by opponent, and we had to both depend on our skill and a bit of luck to win that one. As a bonus, let's have a quick look at that point in the last critical turn from our opponent's perspective. and see what they could have done. So our opponent does have the tools that they would have needed to kill everyone on our team. Minty meat rolls for discount on normal attacks, and then return to turn their dice into the Geodice they need, and Covenant of Rock. Of course, we know they had this from their opening hand to give them 2 extra dice at the end. And it's quite hard to do the maths, but I did work it through. And yes, if we don't have any food or anything to disrupt, this setup and the 10 dice our opponent has is enough for them to eliminate our whole team, even after this play. So it is important that we had something here, and in this case that we had it planned out to deal the amount we need to take out Itto. But important to appreciate that it was a really close game. The stacks on Superlative Super Strength and the normal attack bonus from the Elemental Burst really does add up and can deal a lot of damage in one turn. And our opponent very nearly had us there.